I ordered beautiful, not a fat pig. Mountain man saw the obese girl, rejected at train station. I ordered beautiful, not a fat pig. Send this back. Cornelius Blackwell's voice cracked through the Millbrook train station like a whip, slicing through the steam, the grit, and the murmur of travelers. People stopped mid-step. Conversations died. Heads turned toward the center of the platform where a woman in a simple white dress stood frozen with a cardboard sign in her shaking hands. Magnolia Rose Bennett, 26 years old, soft-bodied, full-figured, with curves she'd spent her whole life trying to hide. Her copper-brown hair had been braided carefully for this day, wrapped with a pale ribbon. Her eyes, a clear green like new leaves in spring, now shone with stunned disbelief. The sign in her hands read, Magnolia Bennett, mail order bride for Mr. Cornelius Blackwell. Magnolia had imagined this moment every mile of the 3-day journey from Boston. She had pictured a gentleman with kind eyes and a reserved smile, a man who would take her gloved hand and say something like, "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackwell." She had sewn her dress herself, stitched hope into every seam, pressed flowers between the pages of his letters. Instead, the man standing before her looked at her as though she were something scraped from his boot. He was in his 50s, tall and well-fed, his black wool coat trimmed with velvet, gold watch chain gleaming against his waistcoat. His eyes, however, were mean and small. They swept over her body, from the soft curve of her shoulders to the generous width of her hips, and filled with disgust. "You cannot be Magnolia Bennett," he scoffed loudly. "I was promised a pretty young bride, not this." Color flooded Magnolia's cheeks. She clutched her sign tighter. "Sir, I am Magnolia. We have been corresponding for months. You wrote that you wanted a faithful wife and a gentle heart. I brought your letters, if you need proof." Cornelius yanked a folded paper from his pocket and waved it like an accusation. "These letters describe a refined, slender woman, not some greedy creature who ate her way out of her corset. I will not be cheated. I paid good money. I will not take damaged goods." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone snickered. A woman in a feathered hat whispered to her friend, "Look at her. Poor thing. What did she expect arriving like that?" Cornelius pulled a roll of bills from his coat and flung it toward Magnolia. The notes struck her cheek and scattered across the platform like fallen leaves. "There, that should cover your train fare back to Boston," he barked. "Go home, starve a little. Next time, don't lie in your letters." Magnolia's vision blurred. She dropped to her knees, scrambling to gather the money, her fingers numb with shame. Around her, Boot stepped back to avoid touching her skirt, as though kindness were contagious. A boy laughed and pointed. "Look, Ma, the fat bride got returned." Somewhere near the freight crates, a tall man in worn buckskin and a weathered hat watched the scene unfold, gray eyes narrowing, jaw tightening. Tobias Stone, mountain man of Blue Ridge, had come down from the timberline to buy supplies. He had planned to be in and out of town within the hour, but when he saw the woman in the white dress crumble on the filthy platform while an entire town pointed and laughed, he knew he wasn't going anywhere. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from right now. Tobias Stone didn't belong in Millbrook. He belonged to the timberline, where wind carved the pines into crooked silhouettes, where a man could hear his own heartbeat echo off the mountains, where silence was an honest companion. Down here, among wagons and gossip and store windows cluttered with polished goods, He felt like a grizzly trapped in a parlor. But even a grizzly knew cruelty when he saw it. Magnolia was still kneeling on the platform, collecting the scattered bills with trembling fingers when he stepped closer. She kept her eyes fixed on the ground, trying to make herself smaller, though her body, soft, rounded, and undeniably present, refused to disappear. Someone muttered behind him, "She shouldn't be wearing white. That dress is begging for mercy." A man in suspenders snorted, "They should have charged the train extra fuel for hauling her." Tobias felt something dark coil in his chest. He'd known hardship, loneliness, the kind that crept into a cabin on winter nights and whispered old regrets. But he had never known humiliation, never been ridiculed like a spectacle at the fair. And no woman deserved this, especially not one who stood so still, as if moving would break her entirely. Cornelius Blackwell was already strutting toward a waiting carriage, wiping his gloves as though he'd touched filth. Tobias followed him with his eyes, memorizing the smirk, the arrogance, the way he dismissed Magnolia as though she were nothing more than spoiled meat returned to the butcher. The crowd began to drift away. Whispers faded. The conductor blew his whistle. But Magnolia didn't move. She stayed kneeling, clutching a few wrinkled bills in her hand, staring at the torn remains of what had once been a marriage contract. The dress she'd sewn, every stitch laid in hope, now looked like a costume from a cruel joke. Tobias stepped forward. He didn't kneel right away. He didn't speak. He simply let his shadow fall across her, offering a quiet shield between her and the last of the onlookers. Slowly, Magnolia lifted her head. Her face was blotchy from tears, lashes wet, cheeks burning with humiliation. But her eyes, those pale green eyes, held something beneath the pain. Dignity, iron, a strength she didn't yet know she possessed. Tobias knelt beside her, resting one knee on the wooden planks. "Ma'am," he said softly. She flinched, not from him, from habit. "You all right?" he asked. Her breath hitched. I don't know." She tried to gather the last of the bills, but her fingers shook too much. Without a word, Tobias reached out and collected the scattered money. When he handed it to her, he made sure his touch was gentle, steadying, not claiming. Magnolia swallowed hard. "Thank you." Tobias studied her for a moment, not the way Cornelius had, measuring, judging, but with a quiet curiosity. "What he said about you, that was wrong." Her eyes widened, then darted away. "You don't have to be kind to me." "I'm not being kind," he said simply. "I'm telling the truth." She laughed, a small broken sound. "The truth is, I was rejected in front of an entire train station. The truth is, the man who promised to marry me said I wasn't worth looking at." Tobias's jaw tightened. "Then he's blind." She froze. He didn't retreat, didn't backpedal. He just let the words settle between them, solid and steady. "You don't know me," she whispered. "No," he admitted, "but I saw enough to know you deserved better than what happened here, a lot better." Magnolia's throat bobbed. "I have nowhere to go. My family refuses to take me back. The money he threw at me won't even buy a room for a night." "Then don't stay here," Tobias said. "Not in a town that laughed at your pain." She blinked, confused. What do you mean?" He straightened his back, the late afternoon sun catching in the strands of his beard. "I live up in the Blue Ridge foothills. Cabin's small but sturdy. Quiet. No one to shame you up there. If you need a place to stay for a while, until you decide what comes next, You can come with me." Magnolia stared at him as if he'd spoken in another language. "I don't want anything from you," Tobias added. "No debt, no bargain, no expectations, just offering safety. A man ought to do at least that much." "But why me?" she whispered. He held her gaze, steady and unflinching. "Because no one else stepped up when you needed it." Silence stretched around them, soft, trembling, different from the cruel hush earlier. Finally, Magnolia nodded, a tiny, fragile motion. "All right." Tobias rose and offered his hand. She hesitated only a second before taking it. Her palm was warm, his grip firm, and for the first time since stepping off the train, Magnolia Rose Bennett felt the smallest flicker of something she thought she'd lost forever: hope. Tobias lifted Magnolia's small travel trunk with one hand, as though it weighed no more than a sack of flour, and guided her toward the buckboard wagon tied behind the telegraph office. The horse, a chestnut mare with a white blaze, flicked her ears as they approached, sensing Magnolia's unease. "You can sit up front," Tobias said, adjusting the reins. "Closer to the fire when we camp tonight." Magnolia hesitated. "You're certain? I don't want to take your seat." "It's not my seat," he replied. "It's a place to sit, that's all." She climbed onto the bench, settling her skirts carefully so they wouldn't drag in the mud. Tobias climbed beside her, the wooden slats creaking under his height and weight. When he flicked the reins, the mare started forward, hooves clopping against the packed dirt of the main street. Magnolia kept her head down as they passed the mercantile, the barber shop, the saloon. People stared, some in surprise, some with unhidden amusement, some with pity. But Tobias didn't spare a single glance for them. His focus stayed on the road ahead, jaw hard set, posture dignified in a way that made the whispers behind them fall flat. It was the first time Magnolia had ever sat beside a man who refused to be embarrassed by her presence. The town fell away quickly, replaced by open stretches of golden grass and clusters of pine trees dark against the bright sky. The air smelled cleaner here, crisp, cool, tinged with resin. Magnolia closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. "You all right?" Tobias asked, voice steady but not intrusive. "Yes," she murmured. "I just haven't breathed air like this before." He grunted softly, something close to approval. "This land does that to a person, knocks the soot off your lungs." Magnolia smiled faintly. "In Boston, the closest I got to nature was a potted fern on the kitchen windowsill." "What made you leave?" he asked. She hesitated. "Desperation, I suppose. My family thought a mail-order marriage was better than keeping me under their roof. And Cornelius, he wrote such kind letters. I thought maybe I'd finally be wanted." Tobias's hands tightened on the reins. "Then he lied twice, in the letters, and today." She swallowed. But what if he wasn't lying? What if he simply didn't expect me to look like this? Tobias turned his head and looked directly at her. No pity, no disgust, just a steady, contemplative gaze. "Magnolia, what happened at that station wasn't about your body. It was about his character." Her breath caught. No one had ever framed it that way. He looked forward again. "A man with a decent heart doesn't tear a woman down in public. Doesn't matter what she looks like." Magnolia felt a warmth rise in her chest. Thin, flickering, but there. By late afternoon, the wagon reached the foothills. The road narrowed into a winding trail climbing steadily upward. The higher they went, the quieter the world became. Birds whispered from the treetops. The wind rustled dry needles into soft murmurs. Magnolia watched the mountains unfold, steep ridges, granite cliffs, streams cutting silver paths through the valley below. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Gets wilder the farther we go," Tobias said. "Your cabin will be near the river. Good water, good fishing." Your cabin. The phrase struck her. Unexpected, gentle, generous. Tobias cleared his throat. "My cabin," he corrected quietly. "But you'll have your own room, and freedom to come and go as you choose." She nodded, though her chest tightened with gratitude. As dusk crept in, they reached a small meadow beside a narrow stream. Tobias pulled the wagon to a stop. "We camp here tonight." Magnolia climbed down cautiously. The air was cold now, carrying the bite of winter settling early into the mountains. Tobias set to work without hesitation, unhitching the horse, gathering fallen branches for firewood, checking the stream for signs of predators. Magnolia watched him with quiet amazement. Every movement was fluid, confident, purposeful. This was a man who fit into the wilderness the way roots fit into soil. He noticed her watching. "Cold?" "A little." "Fire'll fix that." He built the blaze quickly. Soon, warmth wrapped around them in soft waves. Tobias handed her a tin cup of hot broth. "Drink slowly." She sipped carefully. The warmth spread through her chest, loosening knots she didn't realize she'd been holding. Tobias sat across the fire from her, elbows braced on his knees. The firelight cast gold across his rugged features, strong brow, square jaw, eyes thoughtful beneath the brim of his hat. Magnolia's voice trembled. "I still can't believe you offered to help me. You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "What do you know?" "That you didn't deserve what happened to you." He met her gaze steadily. "And I know what it looks like when someone's carrying too much hurt alone." She stared into the flames. "Does it ever go away?" "Not all at once," Tobias said, "but it gets lighter when someone else helps carry it." Silence wrapped around them, not awkward but soft, almost protective. Magnolia felt something unfamiliar stirring beneath her ribs. Not fear, not shame. Something gentler, something careful, something like the first thaw of spring under snow. Tobias tossed another log onto the fire. Sparks rose, drifting like tiny stars into the dark. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow we reach the cabin." She nodded and lay down on the bedroll he had spread near the fire. As she closed her eyes, she heard Tobias say quietly, almost to himself, "You're safe tonight, Magnolia." For the first time in years, she believed it. The next afternoon, when the wagon finally rolled into the little clearing by the river, Magnolia felt her breath catch. Tobias's cabin stood beneath a curve of tall pines, their branches whispering softly overhead. Smoke drifted from the chimney, thin, steady, welcoming. The river beside the cabin glittered in the sunlight, and a small wooden footbridge crossed the narrowest point. It didn't look like much, not like the grand homes Cornelius had bragged about in his letters, but it felt like something Magnolia had never known. Home. Tobias guided the wagon beside the porch and climbed down first. "Take your time," he said as Magnolia stepped carefully to the ground. "The trail can rattle a person's bones." Magnolia smiled faintly. "My bones have been rattled for days." He looked as if he wanted to smile back, but didn't quite know how. Instead, he lifted her trunk and carried it through the front door. Inside, the cabin smelled of warm cedar and wood smoke. The main room was simple: hewn log walls, a sturdy table, two mismatched chairs, shelves lined with jars of herbs and dried vegetables. A stone hearth crackled with fire. Near it sat a woven rug worn thin at the edges, and beyond that, two doors, one to Tobias's room, one he gestured toward. "That one's yours," he said. Magnolia stepped inside the small room. A single bed covered with a handmade quilt took up most of the space. Beside it was a little table with a vase that once held flowers. Light poured through a square window carved into the logs. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. Her throat tightened. "It's lovely. It's quiet," Tobias said. "Thought that might be good for you." "It's more than good," she whispered. For a moment, neither spoke. Something warm passed between them, quiet, fragile, unspoken. Then Tobias cleared his throat. "I'll give you time to settle. Supper's in an hour." Magnolia spent the next hour unpacking slowly, carefully. She folded her dresses with trembling hands. These were the only things she owned. On the bottom of her trunk, she found the torn scraps of Cornelius's contract. She hesitated, fingers shaking, then wrapped them in cloth and placed them at the very back of the drawer. Later, when she stepped into the main room, Tobias was stirring a pot over the fire. The smell, rich venison stew, onions, herbs, filled the cabin. Magnolia paused in the doorway, surprised. "You cook?" she asked. "Had to learn," he said. "No one else here to keep me alive." He ladled stew into bowls and set one in front of her. "Eat slow. You didn't have enough these past few days." She obeyed, and warmth spread through her chest with each bite. Tobias watched the fire as he ate, not staring at her, not evaluating her every mouthful the way men in Boston had. When she finished, Tobias stood. "Come on, I want to show you something." She followed him outside along a narrow path that wound toward the back of the cabin. There, tucked beneath a curve of rock, was a small shed, neatly stacked with chopped wood. "I made extra this winter," Tobias said. "Figured you might want to learn how to split logs. Good skill. Helps clear the mind." Magnolia blinked. "Do you think I can do that?" "I think you can do anything with the right tools." He handed her a small hatchet, not too heavy, not too light. "You start with kindling, nothing big." Magnolia gripped the handle. Tobias stepped beside her, not touching her, but close enough that she felt shielded. "Feet apart, weight balanced. Don't swing too hard. Let the blade do the work." She brought the hatchet down, and to her surprise the wood cracked neatly. Magnolia gasped. "I did it!" Tobias's lips lifted, just barely, but it warmed her all the same. "Told you." Her cheeks flushed. "Thank you for teaching me, for everything." His gaze softened a fraction. "You've had too many people telling you what you can't do. Thought maybe someone ought to show you what you can." Magnolia lowered the hatchet, breath unsteady. "No one has ever said that to me, not once." Then they were wrong. His voice was low, certain, dead wrong. Over the next weeks, life settled into a gentle pattern. Magnolia woke each morning to the sound of Tobias splitting wood outside, rhythmic and strong. She cooked breakfast sometimes, biscuits, eggs, sometimes burnt, but Tobias ate every bite without complaint. She washed clothes in the cold river, and Tobias built her a wooden stool so she wouldn't have to kneel on the rocks. When she grew restless, he taught her how to track deer prints in the mud. When she grew afraid of going too far from the cabin, he walked with her until she felt the fear dissolve under the open sky. When nightmares of the train station trembled through her, he lit the lantern and sat quietly in the next room until she fell asleep again. Little things, small gestures that felt enormous. And slowly, very slowly, Magnolia began to lift her chin again. She began to smile, to laugh, to look Tobias in the eyes without apologizing. One evening, as the sun settled behind the ridge and painted the cabin in amber light, Tobias finished repairing the porch railing. Magnolia stood beside him. "It looks sturdy." "It'll hold," he said. "So will I," she murmured before she realized she'd spoken aloud. Tobias turned to her. "You've been strong since the day I met you." "That's not what I felt," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but I saw it." A silence stretched warm and tender between them. Magnolia's pulse fluttered like a startled bird. "Tobias," she whispered, "why are you doing all this for me?" He hesitated, rough hands stilling at his sides. Then, in a voice barely above the hush of the wind, "Because kindness isn't something you earn, Magnolia. It's something you deserve." Her breath caught. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Tobias reached out, hesitated, then brushed it away with his thumb. "Come inside," he said gently. "Night's getting cold." Magnolia followed him, heart full in a way she didn't know hearts could be. Spring crept slowly across the Blue Ridge foothills. Snow melted into the river, wildflowers pushed through the thawed soil, and the mountains began to hum with new life. In the quiet rhythm of the cabin, Magnolia found something she had never known. Peace that didn't feel borrowed, and a sense of belonging that didn't have to be earned with perfection. But peace never lasts long on the frontier. The first sign came from the town below. Tobias had gone to Millbrook for supplies, flour, nails, tobacco, and a new file for his carving knives. Magnolia stayed behind, gathering herbs near the river, humming a lullaby she remembered from childhood. When she heard the wagon rattling back through the trees, she hurried toward the porch to greet Tobias with a soft smile she didn't try to hide anymore. But one look at him stopped her cold. His shoulders were too tense, his jaw too rigid. He didn't jump off the wagon with his usual quiet ease. Instead, he sat still for a long moment before finally climbing down. "Tobias?" Magnolia asked, heart tightening. "What happened?" He exhaled a slow breath and handed her a folded paper. "Saw this nailed to the post by the mill." Magnolia unfolded it, and her hand flew to her mouth. Her name was printed in thick, ugly letters. Wanted for fraud and deception, Magnolia Rose Bennett reported to have cheated Cornelius Blackwell, reward for information. Underneath, someone had scribbled with charcoal, "Last seen with a large mountain man." Magnolia's knees nearly buckled. Fraud? They think I lied? That I tricked him? "Cornelius Blackwell owns half the businesses in town," Tobias said. "He's trying to cover his shame, and he's spreading stories to do it." Magnolia's chest constricted. "People believed him?" "Some," Tobias said. "Not all, but enough that trouble's coming." Her throat tightened with a fear she'd thought she'd left behind. "What kind of trouble?" He looked at her, steady, unshaken. "The sheriff wants to speak with you. He'll come up the mountain if he has to." Magnolia's breath trembled. "I can't face that town again. I can't—" "You won't face it alone," Tobias said. "I'll be right beside you." Those words calmed her and shook her all at once. She sank onto the porch step, gripping the paper until it crumpled. Tobias, this is my fault. You helped me, and now you're caught in the middle of a mess that was mine. I never should have. Stop. His voice was low, firm. He knelt in front of her, large hands covering hers. You didn't cause any of this. Cornelius Blackwell is the one stirring the mud. He's humiliated, so he's sending the shame back toward you. Her eyes filled. People always believed lies about me. They won't this time, Tobias said. Not if we speak first. She shook her head. I can't go back there. The stairs, the whispers. Tobias, I'm not as strong as you think. His thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. You're stronger than you know. What you survived at that train station would have broken most people. Magnolia swallowed. I still feel broken. That's because you're still healing, he said softly. Healing doesn't mean weakness. The wind rustled the pines overhead, scattering early spring needles onto the porch. Tobias stood slowly, offering his hand. Magnolia took it. We'll talk to the sheriff, he said. Set this right. She nodded, though fear still lapped at her ribs. The second sign of trouble came that evening. They were eating supper. Fried trout Tobias had caught, fresh cornbread Magnolia had baked, when footsteps crunched outside the cabin. 3 sets. Magnolia froze, fork suspended in midair. Tobias rose quietly, motioning her behind him. He opened the door with controlled calm, his hand resting lightly on the rifle propped by the frame. Sheriff Eckhart Heron stood on the porch, hat in hand, flanked by 2 deputies. Tobias, the sheriff said. Evening. Sheriff, Tobias replied. State your business. The sheriff cleared his throat. I'm here about the woman you've been sheltering. Magnolia stepped into view before Tobias could stop her. I'm here, Sheriff. Eckhart's eyes softened just a fraction. Miss Bennett, we need your statement about what happened at the station. Cornelius claims... Cornelius lied, Magnolia said quietly, but without flinching. He humiliated me in front of dozens of people. He called me names, ripped up the contract, threw money at me like trash. Tobias did nothing wrong. He only helped me when no one else would. The deputies shifted, unsure. The sheriff studied Magnolia carefully. That true? She lifted her chin. Tobias stood silently behind her, like an immovable wall of warmth and protection. Magnolia spoke clearly, steadily, surprising even herself. I was not a fraud. I was not a deceiver. I was a woman who believed kind letters from a man who turned cruel the moment he saw me. Silence. Then the sheriff nodded, slowly. I believe you. Magnolia's breath left her in a shudder. But Cornelius won't let this lie, the sheriff warned. He's paying men to ask questions. He wants you dragged back to town, humiliated again, and he's a powerful man. He ain't the sort to give up. Tobias's voice dropped into a quiet growl. Then he'll have to come through me. Eckhart sighed. That's what I was afraid of. He tipped his hat. I'll do what I can. But be ready. The mountain won't stay quiet. He left. Magnolia sank onto the nearest chair. Tobias closed the door, bolting it. Tobias, she whispered, I don't want to be the reason anyone gets hurt. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt before her again, just like the day they met. Magnolia, listen to me. You are worth protecting. You are worth standing up for. Whatever storm is coming, we face it together. Her vision blurred. But what if Cornelius keeps spreading lies? What if the whole town turns against us? Tobias lifted her hands to his chest, pressing them over his heartbeat. then let them. The truth doesn't need a crowd. It only needs courage. Her fingers curled into his shirt. His eyes didn't leave hers. Outside, the wind whispered. Inside, something stronger took root. Something braver, fiercer, deeper than fear. Not just hope. Something more. 3 days passed. The mountains held their breath. Magnolia tried to fill the silence with small routines, kneading dough, sweeping the porch, shelling peas Tobias had traded for in town, but every small sound made her flinch. The snap of a twig, the cry of a hawk, even the rush of the river. Trouble felt close, too close. Tobias reinforced the cabin door with an extra plank. He checked the rifle twice a day. He walked the perimeter of the clearing at dawn and dusk, his silhouette outlined against the tall pines. He didn't say it aloud, but Magnolia could see it in the tightening of his jaw. He was waiting for a fight. One afternoon, while Magnolia was hanging laundry behind the cabin, she heard hooves. Not one, many. Her breath froze. "Tobias!" she called, panic threading her voice. He was already stepping out of the barn, rifle in hand, eyes sharp as flint. 6 riders appeared through the trees, led by a man Magnolia recognized instantly. The stiff posture, the polished boots, the cane that tapped against his saddle like a metronome for cruelty. Cornelius Blackwell. Magnolia felt her knees go weak. Cornelius wasn't alone. 5 armed ranch hands flanked him, faces hard, hands on their holsters. Their horses snorted, stamping the earth until dust clouded the air. Cornelius pulled up his reins and sneered. "Well, well, isn't this a charming little nest for thieves and runaways?" Tobias didn't flinch. "Turn around," he said calmly. "You're not welcome here." Cornelius let out an exaggerated laugh. "I'm not here for you, mountain man. I'm here for my property." Magnolia stiffened. "I'm not your property." "Oh, but you are," Cornelius drawled. "You cost me reputation, money, social standing. You embarrassed me in front of half the town. You think I'll let that go?" Tobias stepped in front of Magnolia, blocking her from view. His voice was dangerously quiet. "She owes you nothing." Cornelius eyed Tobias with disdain. "This is between me and that woman. Step aside." "I won't." Cornelius's lips curled. "I could pay you, you know. $100 and a new rifle if you hand her over. She's not worth more than that anyway." Magnolia's stomach twisted. She opened her mouth to speak, but Tobias beat her to it. "You think I'd sell her?" he said, voice low enough to vibrate the air. "Is that how little you think of women, of people?" "She deceived me," Cornelius snapped. "No," Tobias said. "You deceived yourself. You wrote letters to a woman you never intended to respect. And when she arrived, beautiful and brave and hopeful, you punished her for not fitting your fantasies." Cornelius's face contorted with rage. "Move, Stone! I won't ask again." Tobias clicked the hammer of his rifle back. The sound cracked the air like lightning. "Last warning," Tobias said. "Turn your men around." One of the ranch hands nudged Cornelius. "Boss, that's Tobias Stone. Fought in the war. Took down a whole ridgeline of Confederates by himself. Folks say he can shoot the wings off a fly at 50 yards. Cornelius snapped. "I don't care if he can shoot the moon out of the sky." Magnolia stepped out from behind Tobias before he could stop her. "Tobias," she whispered, "let me speak." His jaw clenched. "Magnolia." "I have to," she said softly. She turned to Cornelius. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "Cornelius Blackwell," she said, "you didn't break me that day at the train station. You humiliated me. You mocked my body. You treated me like I was beneath you, but I walked away. And you know what I found?" Cornelia scowled. "What?" "A life, a real one, a good one, and someone who sees worth where you only saw shame." Cornelia sputtered. "You ruined my name." "No," Magnolia said. "Your name ruined itself." The ranch hands were shifting now, glancing at one another, uncomfortable. Tobias stepped closer to Magnolia, not touching her, but near enough that she felt the heat of him like a shield. "You won't take her," Tobias said. "Not today, not ever." Cornelius raised his chin. "Men, seize!" He didn't finish. Tobias lifted his rifle, fast, precise, and fired. The bullet struck the dirt inches from Cornelius's boot. His horse reared, screaming. The ranch hand scrambled back, hands raised, suddenly unsure. "You fire one more shot," Cornelius hissed. "I won't need to," Tobias said. "The next one won't hit dirt." Silence. The ranch hands looked at Cornelius, looked at Tobias. Then, one by one, lowered their guns. Cornelius's face twisted with fury, but he knew when he was beaten. He jerked his reins, turned his horse sharply, and retreated down the trail with the others following behind. When the last hoofbeat faded, Magnolia's legs finally gave out. Tobias caught her. "You're safe," he murmured, voice rough with feeling. "He won't try that again." She held on to him, trembling. "You stood between me and the whole world." He rested his forehead against hers. "I'd stand between you and anything." Evening settled slowly after Cornelius's retreat, the mountains dimming into deep blue shadows, while streaks of orange clung stubbornly to the sky. The danger had passed, but the cabin felt strangely quiet. Too quiet, as if the world was waiting for Magnolia to breathe again. Inside, Tobias lit the lantern and placed it on the table. Its warm glow softened the lines of his face, but Magnolia could still see tension lingering in his shoulders. She stepped closer, her hands still trembling. "Tobias," she whispered, "you could have been killed today. They all had guns. They were ready to fight." "So was I," he answered, voice steady. "I'd fight every man in Millbrook before I let them lay a hand on you." Her breath hitched. "But why? Why do all this for me?" Tobias hesitated, as if searching for words he'd never spoken aloud. Then he set his rifle aside, turned to her fully, and rested his rough hands gently on her arms. "Because the day I saw you at that station," he said quietly, "something in me woke up. I'd been living, Magnolia, but I hadn't felt alive in years. And there you were, crying, humiliated, believing every cruel word thrown at you. But beneath all that, I saw your strength. I saw the way you stood back up. I saw the courage it took just to breathe." Magnolia blinked hard. "Tobias, I was terrified. And still you kept going." His thumbs brushed her arms. "That's more bravery than most men will ever know." Magnolia swallowed. "I don't feel brave. I feel like everything is uncertain again." "It doesn't have to be." He stepped back just enough to take something from the shelf beside the hearth. A small carved box, simple but beautiful, made of polished walnut. Magnolia's pulse fluttered when he placed it into her hands. "I carved that for you," Tobias said softly. "I wasn't sure when to give it." Magnolia opened the lid. Inside was a key, small, warm from the wood it rested in. She looked up, confused. "A key?" Tobias drew a slow breath. "To this cabin, to this land, to everything I can offer." His voice deepened, thickening with emotion he no longer fought. "Magnolia, this place isn't much, but it's safe, it's quiet, and it's yours if you want it." Her heart thudded painfully. "You mean stay?" Not just for now, for as long as you choose. He stepped closer again, his gaze steady enough to anchor her trembling breath. You've walked into my life and changed it without trying. I don't want you to leave, not tomorrow, not next month, not ever, but I won't ask you to stay out of gratitude or fear. Only if you want this, want us. Magnolia's vision blurred with tears, warm, overwhelming, but not from sorrow. She covered her mouth with one shaking hand. Tobias, she whispered, I've never been wanted before, not truly. He touched her cheek with a tenderness she'd only dreamed of. You're wanted now. The lantern flickered, the fire snapped gently in the hearth, and everything felt impossibly soft. Magnolia held the key tightly. Yes, I want this. I want home. I want you. Tobias closed his eyes briefly, like the words hit him deeper than any bullet. And when he opened them again, they were gentler than she'd ever seen. Then you're home, he murmured. You're safe here. She sank into his arms, and he held her as if the world beyond the cabin walls no longer existed. Stories like Magnolia and Tobias's remind us that even in the harshest places, train stations filled with ridicule, lonely mountains wrapped in winter, towns ruled by pride, kindness can still find its way through. Sometimes the life we lose is the one we were never meant to keep. The life we find is the one that finally lets us breathe. If you're listening right now, know this. Every comment you leave, every place you're listening from, becomes part of these stories too. So tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight?